We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph in Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 113a. On the previous Amud, Rav Chisda said that Meiser Sheni, if it is outside of Yerushalayim, everybody agrees that it's considered to be Mammon Gavoa. It's considered that it belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, and therefore it is not Chayiv and Chala. That's what Rav Chisda said. And the Gemara had asked a question from our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says that Meiser Sheni of an Ir Hanidachas, it's Yigonzu, it has to be buried. And the question of the Gemara is, if you're going to say that outside of Yerushalayim the Meiser Sheni is considered Mammon Gavoa, there should be nothing wrong with it at all. You shouldn't have to do anything with it, even if it is in an Ir Hanidachas. And so the Gemara answered actually the case of the Mishnah when it says the Meiser Sheni, it has to be buried. It's talking about where that Meiser Sheni was from a different city, but it was already brought to Yerushalayim. The Gemara said, well, if it was already brought to Yerushalayim, so then the halacha should be that the Mechitza should be koltos. It's now within the walls of Yerushalayim, and everything should be fine. And the Gemara answered, well, we're talking about a situation where the Meiser Sheni is Tameh, but the Gemara said, even if the Meiser Sheni is Tameh, you can just redeem that Meiser Sheni. And so then the Gemara said, well, we're not talking about the original Meiser Sheni, we're talking about the food that was bought with the kesef of Meiser Sheni. In other words, the person had redeemed the original Meiser Sheni onto money. He brought the money to Yerushalayim. He bought food with that money, and so and then that lakoach, that stuff that he bought, became tameh, and so therefore, again, that's why you're not going to be able to say kaltu mechitzos. That's why it has to be buried. But the Gemara still continues and asks v'lifrike, but still you should be able to redeem it. T'tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah halakoach bekesef Meiser Sheni shenitzma yifta, that even stuff that's bought with the money of Meiser, halakoach bekesef Meiser, rather, even that which is bought with the money of Meiser Sheni shenitma, if it becomes tameh yifta, it can be redeemed. And the Gemara says to that, no, ki Rabbi Yehuda d'amar you cover. Well, our mission is following Rabbi Yehuda that happens to say lakoach bekesef Meiser shenitma has to be buried. But then the Gemara asks, if so if it's just being buried because it happens to be tameh, it has nothing to do with Ir Hanidachas. My Ir Hanidachas, why do you have to talk about this by an Ir Hanidachas? Afilu di'almanami, even in general, if you have lakoach bekesef Meiser Sheni shenitma, the halacha is in that situation, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it has to be buried. And so the Gemara instead says, Ella rather liolam b'tahar. Really, we are talking about Meiser Sheni that is tahar, and it enters into Yerushalayim. It's coming from an Ir Hanidachas, but it enters Yerushalayim. The question is, then we should say that the mechitzos are koltos and everything should be fine with that Meiser Sheni. But uchigon de nafal mechitzos, we're talking about a situation where the walls around Yerushalayim fell down. Uchid Rav, and it's like Rava says, Diyamar Rava, because Rava says mechitza lechol deoraisa. When it comes to the walls in terms of eating, that's a deoraisa halacha. We'll see Rashi in a moment. But liklot, when it comes to them protecting, so to speak, the Rabbanon, that's the Rabbanon. V'chigaz Rabbanon ki isnu lemechitza. The Rabbanon only made that decree when the mechitza is standing. Ki lesnu lemechitza lo, but they did not make that decree if the wall is not standing. And Rashi explains, v'lifrike lekule, why not redeem all of it? To Mishani, and the Gemara answers, Rabbi Yehuda, we're following Rabbi Yehuda. Diyamar lo olim lemitzvas pedyoner. Rabbi Yehuda says it's not strong enough that it can take its redemption, that the redemption will be effective. Bahi Mishnah gufa b'Meseches Meiser Sheni. He says that in that Mishnah in Meseches Meiser Sheni. V'hainu nami Meiser Sheni. Dekamar yigones b'kvur. That's the same Meiser Sheni that we're saying over here. Yigones, that we're saying it has to be buried. And then the Gemara said, Ela liolam. The Gemara then asked, if that's the case, you don't even need to talk about the Meiser Sheni from an Ir Hanidachas. That's true all the time. And so the Gemara said, Ela liolam. Rather, we're talking about Meiser Sheni the Ir Hanidachas tahar. We're talking about Meiser Sheni from an Ir Hanidachas that actually was pure. V'yasku legava, and it was brought into Yerushalayim. Udeko amar lishtri ba'achila, and that which you said, it should be permitted in eating the hakaltu mechitzos achar shenichnas lechomas Yerushalayim, because once it enters into the chomas Yerushalayim, it's like been admitted into Yerushalayim and protected, so to speak, by the walls of Yerushalayim. Diyamar Rava b'shchita schulim and perik v'hem hamekasha, because Rava says mechitzos lechol doraisa. Again, we're talking where the wall fell down, and in terms of eating, it's doraisa, meaning it's a doraisa halacha min haTorah mitzvah lechol lefnim min hachoma. When it comes to eating the Meiser Sheni, it's a doraisa to eat it within the walls. Aval mechitzos liklot, but the halacha of mechitzos liklot, sheyu mechitzos koltos, that the mechitzos, again, they should admit that Meiser Sheni. Bein le'inyan pedia, whether we're talking about redemption, bein lechol inyan, whether we're talking about any other halachas, midrabanan, who that's all midrabanan. V'chigozer rabbanan de tahani klitas mechitzos l'meiser, when the rabbanan said that klitas mechitzos works for meiser, de shuvei no yachol ifdoso, that now it can no longer be redeemed. Ule'inyan Ir Hanidachas nami shelo yehe begniza, and also when it comes to Ir Hanidachas as well, that it should no longer have geniza, it should no longer be buried. That's only heichadesnu mechitzos. That's only if the walls are there. If the walls are not there, then in fact it does have to be buried again if it's Meiser Sheni of Ir Hanidachas. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Kisvei HaKodesh Yigonzu, when it comes to the holy writings, the holy scrolls of Inir Hanidachas. And the Gemara says, Masnisin Deloka Rabbi Eliezer. Our Mishnah does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, the Tanya, because we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer says, Kol Ir sheyesh ba afilu mezuzah achas, any city that even has one mezuzah, Eina Nasas Ir Hanidachas, cannot become in Ir Hanidachas. Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, V'sarafta b'oesha so'ir, V'es kol shlala kol, it says you're going to burn everything in the city. V'hecha di'ika mezuzah, now if there's a mezuzah in the city, lo efshar, it's not possible to burn everything. You can't burn the mezuzah, because it's written, Lo sasun kein la Hashem alokechem, don't do this to Hashem, meaning to say you cannot burn the name of Hashem, and therefore that city cannot become an Ir Hanidachas. And Rashi explains, Dichsivi Badatem, it says in the Pasuk that you should destroy Es Shema Min Hamokamahu. It's talking about destroying the names of the Avodah Zarah. V'samachle, and then near that it says, Lo Sasun Kein La Hashem Elokechem, don't do that to Hashem. Ufa Mezuzah Hoel Uchsib Ba Askara, so in a Mezuzah, since there are the names of Hashem there, Ef Shel Sarfa, since you can't do that to Hashem, you can't burn that, you can't destroy the name of Hashem. Mishum Krad Lo Sasun Kein, that's what we learn from the Pasuk of Lo Sasun Kein. V'anon Ba'inan Shlal, and again, we require that all of these spoils of the city that needs to be destroyed. V'lekin, you don't have that if you can't do that to the mezuzahs. The high lav shlal shamayim, who this was changed by the Masoras Hashas. It should be lav. It comes from the Rashash because this is not shlal shamayim. The mezuzah is not considered shlal shamayim. Therefore, technically, it is something that would need to be burned. But of course, you cannot burn it, and therefore, such a city cannot be an Ir Hanidachas according to Rabbi Eliezer. But of course, that is not the opinion of the Tana of our Mishnah. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, if you execute judgment on an Ir Hanidachas, that's like bringing a Karbanola. And then the Mishnah goes on to bring a Machlukas Tanoim between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi HaGlili in terms of whether the Ir Hanidachas can be rebuilt as gardens or pardesim or orchards. Rabbi Akiva says that's fine, and Rabbi Yossi HaGlili says that's problematic. And the Gemara turns to that Machlokas Tanoim. Leimo, let us say, but Rabbi Avin Amar Rabbi Lo Kamiflagi, that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, they are arguing in the teaching of Rabbi Avin as follows. Rabbi Avin said from Rabbi Lo, the Amar Rabbi Avin Amar Rabbi Lo, Rabbi Avin said that Rabbi Lo said, Kol mokom shatamotze klal ba'aseh, anytime you find a generalization by a positive commandment, uprat below saseh, and then you find a detail as a negative commandment, ein donin oso b'chlal uprat, you cannot judge that, you cannot treat that as a klal uprat, and we will suggest Damar Islay de Rabbi Avin, that one opinion holds like Rabbi Avin, Umar Leslay de Rabbi Avin, and the other one does not hold like Rabbi Avin. And Rashi explains, Klal bi'aseu prat below saseh, again you have a generalization that's a positive commandment, and then detail that is a negative commandment. And Rashi says, Kagon, for example, our very case, V'haisa tel olam, it says that the Ir Hanidachas has to be an everlasting ruin, that is a positive. Klal, that's a generalization. Da'afilu ginos pardesim, that means even gardens and orchards. Lo saseh, you can't make it into anything. You can't make it into gardens or orchards either. Elatia tel olam, it's going to be an everlasting ruin. Shuaseh, that is a positive commandment. Lo sibona, and then it says it cannot be built further. That's binyan bottom. That refers to binyan. That refers to actually building houses. V'hu lo saseh, and that's a negative. That's a particular negative, specifically in terms of houses. So ein donin oso b'chlalu prat. So we cannot judge that. We cannot treat that as a klalu prat. That's what Rabbi Avin said. When you have a situation like this, it's not treated as a klalu prat. Lomar ein b'chlal elamasha b'prat. Now, in a normal klalu prat, we would say we only follow the prat, whatever is specified. The lo saseh perushu, by a klalu prat, we assume that it's an explanation. Kilomar, like it's saying, V'haisa tel olam, when it says it should be an everlasting ruin, lebinyan kamar, that means lebinyan. So if you're holding that it is a klalu prat, that it would only be houses that cannot be built, but you would be allowed to build orchards. Aval ginus upardesim shari, but ginus and pardesim would be permitted. Now Rabbi Avin says we do not treat it like a klalu prat, and therefore if we're not treating it like a klalu prat, that means if you're following Rabbi Avin, you are not building the ginos and pardesim. What Rabbi Avin is saying is that it's two separate things the pasuk is saying. We're not saying it's explaining. It's just two separate things. When it says V'haisa tel olam, it's an everlasting ruin. Leginos upardesim, that would even be ginos and pardesim, that would be problematic. That's the way that Rabbi Avin would understand. And lo sibon, when it says don't build it further, kol binyonim shabaolam, that means all types of building. Va'afilu leginos upardesim, and even when it comes to gardens and orchards, lo sibon, it should not be built further. further, we darshan it l'davar shahaya bechlal v'yotzim min haklal. When you have something that is generalized and then there's something that's taken out of the generalization, l'lamed, it's coming to teach us something. Lo l'lamed al atzmo yotz, it's not teaching about itself. Al l'lamed al haklal kulo yotz, it's teaching about the whole generalization. V'lomar binyan bechlal hayan, the way that Rabbi Avin would understand is that building is considered like a generalized idea. V'loma yotz, and why is this being specified? Lahakish lach, to make this comparison. Ma binyan miyuchot shu yishav b'nei adam, just like binyan is something that people settle. Av kol binyan, we're really including anything that could be in that category of yishav. Any kind of building could go in ginos or pardesim. Ginos and pardesim would also be included. In other words, according to Rabbi Avin, if we're not going to treat it like a klal uprat, it actually will include the ginos and pardesim. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Savar ain't done in Rabbi Avin, and that's what Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds. He holds we do not treat it like a klal uprat. He follows Rabbi Avin. That's why he says ginos and pardesim are prohibited. V'darish hachini darshans v'haisatel olam mikol mili. Haisatel olam means that it has to be an everlasting rule from everything. Shalo yasa b'shum davar, don't do anything. V'losi bana od, and then comes losi bana od, the mashma, which tells us binyan batim. It tells us about building houses. Ashmin and lav b'binyan batim. That tells us about a lav by binyan batim. V'ginos upardesim. And when it comes to gardens and orchards, isser aseh hu deika, that would actually be an isser aseh. That would be included now through an isser aseh of, again, through what the pasuk said, that it's a tel olam, v'haisa tel olam, that would be the isser aseh. Kach shamati, says Rashi, that is what I heard. And Rabbi Akiva savar danin, but Rabbi Akiva would say, no, we just treat it like a klal uprat. The lo Rabbi Avin, not like Rabbi Avin. If we're treating it like a klal uprat, then we only say houses, but nothing else is prohibited. Ginos and pardesim would be mutter according to Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara continues and says, lo, no, the kuli alma, it could be that everybody islahu to Rabbi Avin. It could be everybody agrees that in general we would follow Rabbi Avin. We would not treat it like a klal uprat. And so if that's the case, v'hachan over here, when it comes to irani dachas, b'hakam iflgi, here's actually what they're arguing about. Mar savar, one says od, when it says again lo si bone od, that's legamri mashma, that means totally. Umar savar, and when the other one says od, when it says the word od, lechamash haisa, means it cannot be built the way it was. And Rashi explains the kuli alma islu Rabbi Avin. Everybody agrees with Rabbi Avin. Even Rabbi Akiva, who permits ginos and pardesim, he agrees with Rabbi Avin that in such a situation we are not going to treat it like a klal uprat. In that which Rabbi Akiva says that you're allowed to convert the irani dachas into ginos and pardesim, again, if we're not treating it like a klal uprat, why is that the case? We should say anything similar. We should say there's also a prohibition on ginos and pardesim. No, the reason why Rabbi Akiva says that it's okay, lav mishum devi alma less leid Rabbi Avin, it's not because in general he doesn't hold of Rabbi Avin. Devadai milsa kamefarshi, certainly it is explaining. V'haisa tel olam, it's explaining what does it mean in everlasting rune. B'mai b'binyan batim, it means to say building of houses, the losi bana od, which is mentioned in losi bana od. Lo mashmalei b'chol binyanin, but the difference is that according to Rabbi Akiva, when it says losi bana od, it's not mashma all kinds of building. The kasavar od lechamosha hoisa mashma, because he holds that the word od actually is telling you that it shouldn't be built up what it was before. Kilomar lo sachzor velosi bana od, means it shouldn't, don't go back and build it up again like it was. Mashma kagon shahaisa mitchila, that phrase losi bana od is don't build it like it was before. Losi bana od avol nasa ginos upardesim, but it could be gardens and orchards. In other words, the way Rabbi Akiva understands even the part of the pasuk of losi bana od, when it is taken on its own, it means only houses and it is not referring to ginos and pardesim. No prohibition of ginos and pardesim. Umar savar od legamri mashma. The other one says od means entirely. Could go like saying damar la'olam voed. It's like saying forever. V'od lashon voedhu. According to this, v'od would be like a lashon voed, like forever and forever. Shalosi bona liolam. It should never be built l'shum davar for anything. Lo lebinyan batim v'lo leginos pardesim. Losi bona od. It shouldn't be built as houses. Shouldn't be built as gardens and orchards. So really, it could be that the machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili is simply how to understand the word od. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Eino nivnis," it's not rebuilt. The irani dachas is not rebuilt. Avol nasis hi ginos upardesim, but it can be converted into gardens and orchards. And some read this two dots without the two dots. It's just a continuation of the previous line. That would be read as follows: Umar Sovereign one holds, od l'chamasha hoisa eino nivnis. Od means that it's not built to the way it was. Avol nasis hi ginos upardesim, but it can be made into gardens and orchards. In any case, the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Hayuba ilonos telushin. Let's say the Ir Hanidachas, it has trees that are detached, so asurin, those are forbidden, those are destroyed with the rest of the city. Mechubarn, but if they're still attached to the ground, mutarin, those are going to be mutter, because again, it has to be that you gather everything in the city and burn it, but not that you are detaching things and gathering them and then burning them. Shall Ir Acheres, now if it's of another city, which the Gemara will explain in a moment, so then Bain telushin, Bain mechubar nasr. Doesn't matter if the trees are detached or attached, they are forbidden. And the Gemara says, My Ir Acheres, what is the Brisa talking about when it says the trees of another city? And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Chisda says Yericho. This is actually just a reference to the city of Yericho. Techsib, because it's written in the pasuk V'hai Soyer Cherem Lashem. It says that year becomes like a cherem, that entire city. And the pasuk further says Vayishava Yehoshua Ba'esa Hilemor, that Yehoshua swore at that time, Orur Ha'ish Lifnei Hashem, cursed is the man before Hashem, Asher Yakum Uvano Esair Azos Es Yericho, that he tries to rebuild the city Yericho. Bevachora Yisden, if he tries to do that with his firstborn, he will lay the foundation, meaning his firstborn will die. Uvitziiro Yitziv Dalse, and then with his youngest, he's going to establish the doors of the city, and that is the curse that was set upon anyone who tries to rebuild Yericho, and that's the reference over here as well. That goes for both the trees that are attached and the trees that are detached. They are all forbidden. They are all usur. And the Gemara continues, Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, Lo Yericho al Shem Ir Acheres. You can't build Yericho and give it another name. V'lo Ir Acheres al Shem Yericho. And also, it's not allowed that someone can build another city and call it Yericho. Techsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, this is in Sefer Malachim, Bonachiel Beisa Eli es Yericho ba'aviram bechoro yisda uviskuv tziiro heitzev dalse. It says exactly this. When Chiel, he tried to build Yericho, he did it with Aviram, his firstborn. He laid the foundation. Again, his firstborn died, and then Skuv, who was his youngest, that one died when he stood up the doors of the city. And Rashi explains again in an Ir Hanidachas mechubar and mutar, and if they're attached to the ground, it's mutar to tikbots v'saraft, as we said. You gather and burn everything. Amar Achmana, that's what the Torah says. Mishena mechusar lekvitzo streif. It has to be things that only need to be gathered and burned. Yotzazet, to exclude if it's attached to the ground. Shemechusar tlisho kvitzo streif, that those require that they have to be detached and gathered and burned. If it has to be detached from the ground, that is not included. And when it comes to Yericho, it says v'chol asher bo, anything in it. Afilu ilonos mechubar asher bo nesar, meaning even the trees that are attached to the ground, those are going to be forbidden when it comes to Yericho. Hachi Garsin Vayishava Yehoshua Lemor Oru Ha'ish. Again, the pasuk says, "Cursed is the man who rebuilds Yericho." Ukraka Dorish Va'azal, and the pasuk, it continues to darshan and go on. Bevachora Yisadena Uvitziiro Yitziv Dalse. With his firstborn, he's going to lay the foundation. With his youngest, he'll stand up the doors. Uchashayamid Dalse Yomus Beno HaKatan. When he stands up those doors, his youngest son will die. And then the Gemara said, "Lo Yericho al Shem Ir Acheres." He can't build Yericho and call it by another name. Shelo Yibone Yericho v'Yosef Shemo al Shem Ir Acheres. He can't build Yericho and then call it some other name. V'lo Ir Acheres al Shem Yericho. He can't build another name and call Yericho. Sha'afilo Bone Ir Acheres v'Kara Yericho. Even if he built another city and called Yericho Asr Livnosa, that's forbidden to build that. Sha'afilo Shem Yericho Yimachal Yolam. Even the name Yericho has to be erased forever. Uchsiv, and it's written B'Yamav Bonachil Beiso Elias Yericho B'Yamav Shalachav. It means in the days of Achav, when Achav was the king, Chiel built the Al Sha'avar Al Ha'olah, because he transgressed this curse. Karile Beiso Eli. That's why it's called Chiel Beiso Eli, because he transgressed that oath. Es Yericho, it says Yericho, it says Es Yericho, V'lo Yericho Atzmabon. He didn't even build Yericho itself. Elo Ir Acheres Al Shem Yericho. He actually built another city and called Yericho. Shekarol Al Yericho. He called that Yericho V'lo Isparish Hamanol. And it's not explained in the Gemara where this comes from, how we know this. And the Gemara continues, Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, Ba'aviram Bechoro Rasha Lo Haya Lo Lilmod. By Aviram, his firstborn, who was wicked, he should not have learned. Chiel would not have necessarily known he was doing something wrong. But Beskuv Tziro, but when Skuv, his youngest, died, Haya Lo Lilmod, he should have learned that he was doing something wrong. But the Gemara immediately continues and asks, Aviram Uskuf Ma'avid, what exactly did Aviram and Skuv do wrong that they're referred to as a Rasha, as wicked? And so the Gemara continues and explains, Hachi Kamar, this is what we're actually saying. Ba'aviram Bechoro Haya Lo Lilmod La'oso Rasha Beskuv Tziro. By Aviram, his firstborn, when he died, that Rasha, referring to Chiel, the father, he should have realized what was the cause of the death of Skuv, his youngest. And the Gemara continues, Mimashma shenemar ba'aviram bechor, from the fact that it says Aviram, his firstborn, Eini yodea sheskuf tziro, don't I already know that Skuv is his youngest? Ma talmud lomar Skuv tziro, why does it say Skuv is his youngest? Melami, that teaches us shaya mekaver v'holech, that he was continuously burying all of his sons, me Aviram ad Suguv, from Aviram until Suguv. And Rashi explains, Va'aviram bechoro yista, again, by Aviram, his firstborn, he laid the foundation. Aviram harasha, Aviram was wicked. Kishemeisa Aviram harasha, when Aviram the wicked died, lo haya lo lechia lilmod, Chia would not have necessarily learned shelo livnos as Yericho, not to rebuild Yericho. But again, then the Gemara questioned this and asked, Aviram was skuv my Avid, what did Aviram and skuv do to kari lu Rishoim, that they're referred to as Rishoim? And then the Gemara had another question, Eini yodea sheskuv tziro, don't I already know that skuv was the youngest? Milsabam penafshi, this is a new sentence. Well, in Midrash, we're making this drush again to say that all of his children died. Mimashma shenemar ba'aviram bechoro. The Gemara is saying from the fact that it says Aviram was his firstborn, Eini yodea sheskuv tziro, don't I know that skuv was his youngest? Elamatam alomar skuv tziro. Why does it say that skuv was his youngest? Shahaya kover v'holech me'aviram v'yad skuv. He was bearing children from Aviram until skuv shutzar mikulam, who was the youngest of all of them. And the Gemara continues, Achav shushvine hava Achav, he was a close friend of Chiel, and he was the groomsman of Chiel. And Asa Iyu ve'Elio lemishal bishlama Beitamya, so he and Elio Hanavi, they came to ask how he was doing at Beitamya, means to say at the house of mourning, when he was mourning over the death of his sons. Yosef v'kamar, and he was sitting and he said as follows, Dilma kimelat Yoshua hachi lot, maybe when Yoshua cursed the person who rebuilds Yericho, maybe he meant as follows, Lo Yericho al Shem Acheres, that Yericho can't be built and given another name. V'lo Acheres al Shem Yericho, and maybe it also meant that you can't build another city and call it Yericho. Amar le Elio, and Elio said to him, yes, you're exactly right, that's why you are receiving this curse. And the Gemara continues, Amar le, he said to him, Hashta levotza de Moshe loka mekaima. Now the curse of Moshe Rabbeinu is not even fulfilled. T'chsiv, because it's written in the pasuk, v'sartem v'avartem, it says if you turn away and you worship avodah zarah, uchsiv, and it's written, v'choraf Hashem bochem v'yotzar hashamayim, it says then Hashem is going to get angry and he'll close up the heavens, it's not going to rain. And that curse was not fulfilled. How do we know that? Vahu gavra, because that particular individual, he's referring to himself, ukim le avodas kochavim, he set up avodah zarah, I'll call telam v'telam, on every single row, on every single furrow, every single high place where you can put an avodah zarah, he put an avodah zarah. V'lo shavik le mitra demezel misked le, and the rain, it doesn't even let up to allow him to go ahead and worship the avodah zarah. That's how much rain there is. You see that this curse never came true, even though we're setting up all of this avodah zarah, but the rain still comes. And so levatza de Yoshua talmidei mekayim, do you think the curse of Yoshua, his student, the student of Moshe Rabbeinu, with that curse is being fulfilled? And when Elio Hanavi heard this miyad, immediately vayomer Elio atishbi mitoshe ve'gilad, Elio Hanavi said, Chai Hashem Elokei Yisrael, by the life of Hashem, the God of Israel, talu mater, if there should be any rain, meaning he wanted it to be that the curse would in fact be fulfilled. It's true, if they're worshipping avodah zarah, there shouldn't be rain. And so boy rachme, he asked for mercy. Elio Hanavi davened v'havulei aklida de mikron, it was given to him the keys to the rain. V'kam v'azal, and he got up and he left. And Rashi explains, V'lo shavik mitra mezal umiska, the rain doesn't allow us to go and worship the avodah zarah. Shaya halichlech holech v'gadol merov hagashamim, because all of the roads, they're so dirty because of the rain. Haboin la'olam, all of that rain that comes to the world. Shein manichin leilech l'shtachavos lavodas kocham, they don't let us walk to worship the avodah zarah. Mitoch derachim meluchlachos betit, because there's so much mud on all of the roads. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk says, Vahi dvar Hashem elav lemor, the word of Hashem came to him saying, this is in Sefer Malachim, Lech mizel fanisulach v'kedma, go from here, and you should go, fanisulach v'kedma, you should go east, v'nistarta b'nachal Kris, and then you'll go by the Nachal Kris, by the stream of Kris, v'ha'orvim meviim lo lechem uvasar ba'boker, and it says that the ravens would bring to Elio Hanavi, they'd bring him bread and meat in the morning. And the Gemara says, Mehecha, from where did they get this bread and meat? Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Mi beitav from the slaughterhouses of Achav. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk says, Vahi miketz yamin, was after some time, Vayivash hanachal, the stream dried up, Ki lo haya geshem ba'aretz, because there was no rain in the land. Kevan dechazin, the Gemara says, once Elio Hanavi saw the ikat sara b'alma, that there was pain in the land because there was no rain, ksiv, it's written, Vahi dvar Hashem elav lemor, the word of Hashem came to him saying, Kum lech tzarfasa, it says, go to tzarfas, ksiv, and it's written, Vahi achar advar ma'ila, Chola ben ha'isha balas habayis, it says that the son of the woman who was the Balabayas got sick, and he wanted to bring back to life that child. And so boy rachame, so now Elio Hanavi again, he asked for mercy, he davened, Lamitan le aklida de tchias hamesim, to give to him the key for tchias hamesim, for the resurrection of the dead. And the response was Amrile, they said to him, Shalosh maftechos lo nimsru l'shliach, there are three keys that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't give over to an agent. Shal chaya, one is of the chaya, of the midwife, so to speak, to give birth. V'shal geshamim, and then there's the key to the rain, which right now Elio Hanavi had. V'shal tchias hamesim, and also the the key to Tchias HaMesim, the key to the revival of the dead. And so Yomru Shtayim B'yad Talmud, if we're going to give you another key, they're going to say that two of the keys are in the hand of the student, V'yachas B'yad Harav, and only one remains in the hands of the master. I see if you bring this key, give this key back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, then the key to reviving the dead, that will be given to you. It's written, it says, go to Achav and I will bring the rain, meaning to say the key was no longer in the hands of Eliyahu Navi, now I will bring the rain. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to bring the rain. And the Gemara continues, Darash Ahugli Law, Kame de Rav Chisda, particular Galilean, Darshan in front of Rav Chisda, Mashal de Eliyahu, Lamah Davar Dama. What's a mashal to this incident with Eliyahu? What's it similar to? Lagavra de Tarke Lagalia, Va'avde Lamiftache. It's like somebody who slams the gate, he closes the gate shut, and then he loses the key. That's the same thing that happened over here with Eliyahu Navi, as Rashi explains. The Tarke Lagale, Shasasam Shar Shalo, he closes the gate, Va'avde Lamiftache, he loses the key. Kach Asa Eliyahu, that's what Eliyahu did. Noal l'sharei motor, he closed the gates of rain. It wasn't raining. And then at the end, he lost the key to the rain. He wasn't even able to open it up again. Because it wasn't reopened through him. It was reopened through HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so that is the mashal again, that he lost the key, so to speak. And the Gemara continues, Darsh Rabbi Yossi b'tzipore, Rabbi Yossi, he darshan in tzipore, Abba Eliyahu, Father Eliyahu. That's like a term of respect or endearment for Eliyahu Navi. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Gimel Amid Beis.